Hey everybody, I'm really excited about today's episode. I talked with Kristiaan Hartmann, and we had a really great conversation about building clarity and motivation to learn. Kristiaan spoke to his own challenge in making decisions at important crossroads in life and how he learned to trust his intuition, to take action and change course when necessary, as he went from snowboard instructor at 17 to people manager to lecturer and entrepreneur. Kristiaan shared how he and his co-founder at Prototype U use best practices from lean, agile, design thinking, and behavioral design to help professionals get from inspiration to action. We talked about the power of a posture of experimentation and a bit about Kristiaan's current business prototype, where he's putting into practice the same methods he teaches to others to help entrepreneurs take that meaningful action within a structure of trusted and supportive accountability. Without any further ado, here is my conversation with Kristiaan Hartmann. All right, welcome to the Building Thinkers podcast today. I'm so delighted to be joined by Kristiaan Hartmann, and we're going to dig into all things learning, how we really develop individual learners, and talk about motivation and his company, Prototype U. Maybe we'll get into a little bit around just some of the things that have brought him to the work that he's doing now. And so I'm so delighted. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, and I'm excited for having the conversation with you.
Okay, and tell our listeners where you're located, and maybe you can give them a peek of that view because I need to see it again, I think.
Okay, let's start with that.
Yeah,
So I
where
was
are we?
asking Tracy if there's some background noise because I
Uh,
love this background noise. I'm currently actually in my bedroom. I have a little desk here. So most people think I cannot work like this because of the view, but I really like it. To have it, I'm in the Netherlands in a city called The Hague, um, and the town of the city, or people call it a little town, Scheveningen, might be familiar to people in Europe because it's a popular place to visit when you visit in summer.
hmm.
So that's where I am.
And meanwhile, here in Texas, it is 105 and has been 105 for like the last 3 weeks. So I'm just gonna live vicariously through that view.
Yeah, here's a little, it's temperature wise a lot better. It could have been better for us in the summer, but no devastating heat waves.
Yeah, it's wild. Kristiaan, will you tell us a little bit about your background, what brought you to the work that you're doing, any of your story? I saw that you started, well, at least according to LinkedIn, at the very beginning, you started as a snowboard instructor. I want to go from there. Like, tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing.
You know what the nickname is of the Netherlands?
No.
It's like uh, a pancake country. It's like flat. There are no hills, no mountains, nothing. So it probably is a bit weird to be snowboard instructor, right? So I can start off with that. I come from a family full of teachers, mom, dad, my younger sister, aunts, uncles, I think my grandfather. And I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. Maybe because all they all were a teacher, but I was also like, I don't want to be a teacher because if you go to university and study that, then that's what you do for the rest of your life. But then I was a snowboard teacher, and I think I was 17 years old when I started that because the city where I was born, they have an indoor ski slope, and we went on winter sports holidays every winter to the Alps, France, Austria, and I was really hooked on skiing and then on snowboarding, and it was a really nice job to have next to studying teaching snowboarding. So then I was already a teacher, but it was a bit different subject. Also worked there in the rental department. So all the people that came there for an hour, 2 hours, they needed stuff, and I've done that work for 10 years, basically throughout going to high school, studying. So after a couple of years, I became a supervisor. So I was supervising employee groups, 20, 25 people in winter. Really nice responsibility. Learned a lot there about people. Most people were just a couple years younger than I was, some were a bit older. So looking back at that, that was already a great place to learn, although it was just a job for like 16 hours a week next to my studies. And I think every single time I had to make a decision, high school, university, I did not know what to do. So I did something. And I think we have to make these choices and decisions way too early on. Because if I would do it again, probably make some different choices. But after going to, I think in the US, it might be called college. We have a bit of different system. It was a tourism management studies, and then studied at the university for a master degree in organizational culture because I really liked the culture stuff in tourism. And I wanted to work in HR, like organizational culture, people culture, like those positions weren't there yet, I think, or not as in the same way it is now. Couldn't really find something that suited. Went with a recruiter position, not in-house, but like for a company that does recruiting for all kinds of organizations. Hated the job. It felt like I was selling people.
Oh,
Like the goal was to make the sale
yeah.
basically, not to make people happy and find them a really great new job. I mean, that was also a goal, but the main goal was to make money. And so I quit that job and I became a teacher. So it's for the last 10 years, I'm still involved there 1 day a week now. University of Applied Sciences, the tourism management studies. I was a student and I'm a learning coach, lecturer, whatever you want to call it. For the last few, like 4 or 5 years, I'm working only with the students who are in the last phase of the studies, graduating. And the combination of that HR experience during studying, but also I've also been involved in a startup building their HR policy, and the work that I did do at the university. I combined that with my co-founder. His name is Wouter. Another difficult name to pronounce, I think, if you're from not from the Netherlands. So he had a background in helping organizations transform to working better with agile design thinking and lean practices. So we made the combination and thought, what if we use those things not to develop products and services, but people? And that's how prototype use is born, to let people work from prototype designs of their life, of their career, and experiment and learn at the workplace what works not, how can I improve it, reflect often. And that's where we help companies now to implement or to add to the learning culture, learning at the workplace, because I see that learning is something that is never on top of priority lists, never on top of to-do lists. There's always other things to do. So you need to do something that doesn't cost a lot of time and trouble in organizing it. So I think we build a solution for that.
Wow, love it. One of the things that's standing out to me is this, you just said that learning, kind of falls to the bottom of the to-do list. There's always something else. What do you think it is about that? Like, why does that happen? It seems to me, and of course, I'm very biased here in learning and development, and as somebody obsessed with learning, I see all of this potential is in this area, and anything that you are kind of stuck in that you want to move forward in, I see learning as the solution many of those times, but outside of like circumstances and other stuff. But the things that we can control, I see learning is so central to that. Why do
Mm.
we not prioritize it in organizations? Why does it fall to the bottom of the list, in your opinion?
Because most people don't know how to do it. And I'm gonna tell you something that probably will make you laugh, but we do not learn how to learn at school or universities. And that may sound really weird because I'm working in such a system for the last 10 years, but when you're studying, it's about passing the exam, getting the degree, and you just do what you have to do to get there. but you do not learn how to decide without that context what you need to learn or want to learn. And when people can overcome that, which I think many people do eventually when they start working, and there are a lot of good people working in the L&D area that help with that. But then people decide like I want to learn how to have good conversations with people that I'm leading.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start from there, but then they have no idea where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mainly because it's they are looking at it from something that is a result of something that they need to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't come to the root cause. They don't find the root cause of the challenge or the goal that they have. So they start to look at things that do not really make a difference, put a lot of time and energy in it, doesn't make a difference. So nobody likes that. Their leaders, their peers, the person itself. And then it's like this learning thing costs a lot of time. We know people like it, we know people want to develop, but we do not see real results and we want to move forward with the business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it gets on a lower position in the to-do list.
Yeah.
We all know, I think everybody knows it's important. There's no owner of a business who would tell you my people cannot learn and develop. Like that would be crazy. And I think I've never heard somebody say something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a theory, and in practice, it sometimes feels like that. But I
Yeah.
think there are a couple of these reasons that I was just talking about that cause this.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. I couldn't agree more. In fact, in some of the sessions that I run around this topic, I say exactly that about our learning environment. And in the United States, similarly, we call it our K-12 public education system. All of that was built originally on this factory model, industrial revolution, and you batch students through based on age and not necessarily based on mastery or interest or anything like that. And there's been lots of efforts to shift that structure, and yet it remains as this underlying structure that everything has been built upon. And so there's this desire for innovation and this idea of learning how to learn. The closest I've kind of seen to that is around student agency, where we help students understand what we call progress ownership. And so they can see how they are doing towards the things that they're working on. And I think that that's an area where I see now in the corporate environment the disconnect between the individuals and the overall system, which mirrors what I see in our education system as well. The individuals, but within this larger system. So I'm always thinking in the back of my mind about that connection. How do we turn on that learning light for individual people? Because I believe there's so much exponential potential in individuals. And then, L&D becomes getting out of the way, but creating clear systems and structures for people to do what they need to do and what they want to do.
Yeah, I think these structures and systems are important. That's the way I would see a role for, I think department HR is changing. So L&D, HR, people culture, I think they should do all they can to help people learn and develop in the most easiest way or the most simple way or step-by-step way, and focus on that more than what kind of new training should I add to the LMS, or what can I change in the LMS experience, or those kind of things is also important, obviously. Something I was thinking about when you were sharing your vision and your observations is also, I think, a reason that people push learning to the lower end of the to-do list is because it's not always fun to do, right? We all like the end goal that we have in mind, that about the learning and the growth. Like we want to become this, or we want to become better, whatever better is in that. But the road towards it can be tough. And I think it's quite human and natural to steer away
Yeah.
from tough stuff if it's easy to steer away from it. So if it's not like super necessary that you improve, like if you are really bad in giving presentations and you have to give presentations quite often, you will
Hmm.
start to develop that skill, right? Because otherwise you have this really poor presentations and difficult moments on stage.
Hmm.
But if you give a presentation a few times a year, or you aim for a position where you have to give a lot of presentations, you don't feel the pain yet, but you need to go through the pain
Mm.
to get there. And then it's easy to steer away, but oh no, I have this really important task and the world will fall apart if I don't complete it.
Mm. Yeah, that's making me think about this. You said we don't learn how to learn. And I think that a piece you're hitting on here is the the struggle, the productive struggle that's a part of learning, as we are, especially if it's some sort of mindset shift or there is a new way that's come out that's better. Now we have new research that shows, there's a better way to do X, right? Any of that type of stuff where somebody might be kind of set in their ways and inertia takes over. I love being a part of learning experience design in those sessions because it's an interesting challenge to. I had a podcast guest that's a good friend that works in the area of health policy, and she said information doesn't change behavior. And I was like, whoa, okay, gotta pause for a second. That is so true. And yet, how many times have we been in a session where it's like, here's my PowerPoint slides and here's the information, now go do it, with very little
Mm,
mindset shift, very little space for human emotion and wrestling and reflection. And so I think back to this, we don't learn how to learn. One of the pieces you're pointing to is this maybe posture of experimentation, giving people space to try and figure things out. How do we, or can we, structure experimentation, or are those like two different sides of the coin? Then they don't, I don't know, they're not connected or they are connected? What do you think?
how do we structure experiments? That's the question, right?
Yeah, like, or how do we, like, I know we can give space for it, but how much structure do
Mm.
you think is needed to build that space for people to experiment? Is it a structure that's like, okay, here's the new thing, now here's X amount of days? How, if experimentation is a scale, how much space do we need to do that and structure?
I think that really depends on the topic or skill or the context completely. If there should be a fixed amount of time and space for it. Like I think there are a couple of things uh, to use as easy examples so people understand it. Like if you have to make sales calls quite often in your job and you are amazing at it, but you want to become even better at it, and you're gonna experiment in doing these calls differently. If the experiments, they cannot fail, right? An experiment. Either like you learn something that is not going the way you intended, or it goes the way you intended, and then you keep doing that. In this example that I'm giving, if it's not going that well in terms of the sales and you perform less good than before, then obviously that should not take a lot of time because it's in having an impact on the business. The way we do it, the way our structure, so to say, is that the process is first define the learning goals and objectives you have and take a lot of time on that, because if you just share like freely, this is my learning goal, that's not your learning goal most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else. So you need to dig and understand the learning goal. It's also easier to get more motivation if you have a like really understanding of the root of that goal. And then the experiments or the little actions you can take to make steps, like small, easy steps to make progress. The smaller they are, the easier it is to get started. My belief is if you want to set up for success, they should be connected to the work you're already doing, if possible. If not possible, then obviously you need to make some space. And I think you should have a conversation with your leader, your manager, and explain why it's important to you and the team organization. What are the benefits? So the structure that we have built, the investment needed for an employee is 2 hours a month. Like, make space in your calendar 2 hours a month. And if they are able to design their learning plan for the next month in a way that we intended to do it, it doesn't take extra time, but they only do things a bit differently, do things less, and then they free up some space to do other things a bit more. With the intent of to learn stuff, to develop stuff, and when they get back to that 2 hours a month structure, they reflect on it, and based on that, they continue. So the experiments, I think you should not set a time or set in certain space for experiments because they're so different from each other. It's really difficult to come with a definition. It should be like this, but I think the focus should be on what are you already doing? What can you do there?
Yeah, I hear it embedding learning instead of learning as an event. I think oftentimes it can still be there's a lot of work being done in this area, but it can still be, okay, I want a 6-hour training on this. And to your point, if you haven't thought enough about those learning objectives, it could be a miss entirely if you don't begin with what you're really going for and getting to those roots. And one of the questions that I like to ask is, what is something that people, if only people knew when it comes to your industry or the things that you've learned? And I think the thing that you were brainstorming around is in this area, and so is there anything that comes to mind for if only people knew, in the work that you've done?
I think I would come back to what I already shared, that I think 80-90% of employees set learning objectives on regular basis. Maybe it's a yearly thing, maybe it's a bit more often, and that's what they have. But I think there are super good examples out there, but that is not the majority yet.
Yeah.
So putting them aside, I think many people do not know how to get to that root of what's going on here and why do you want this. So if only people knew that if we give you a piece of paper and you write down what are your learning goals, what you write down is not your actual learning goal. It's just the surface of it. There's something deeper. And if you are able to get to that deeper cause of what's going on, then you understand what you need to do. And then it will become more clear. And I see with myself, and it's a bit difficult to speak for others in this, but I see it happening, that motivation comes a bit more naturally when you get to that root or closer to the root of what's going on.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. And one of the things that brought me to some of the work that I'm doing now was this reflection that anytime I had like a big growth spurt in my learning and just growth generally, it was because there was a significant gap between where I was and the next thing I wanted to do. And I was reflecting back, I made my own learning map of just the different things, like starting back to high school. I wanted to play Division I lacrosse, but I was in a state and in a city that didn't have girls lacrosse until high school. And that was too late to get started to try to play in college. And so I went in the summers. I recognize this is from a place of privilege. And I learned in Maryland, and I had a boys lacrosse stick because they didn't even sell girls lacrosse sticks in Texas at that time. So I show up there and everybody's like, who is this girl from Texas with this boys lacrosse stick coming to play in Maryland? But that's where I learned. And I went on to play varsity lacrosse in high school, got to play club, and ended up at University of Richmond in Virginia, got to play there. I ended up transferring from there ultimately, but I did the thing. And when I look back, like that pattern repeated of if something was important enough to me and I did get clear about what I wanted to do, then I naturally put in the time and
Mm.
probably to a bit of obsession at certain points. I had another experience in my early 20s where I ended up being the co-founder of an ed tech app, and this was before children. And I was working on that thing all the time. I was running the help desk, I was doing the Twitter, I was managing programmers, I was doing user experience design, none of which I knew how to do at all before then. I read books, I watched YouTube videos, I figured it out, and was really like binge learning because I understood, the impact it would have in the classroom at that time. And ultimately we hit 1.5 million students with that tool. And I look at the learning and growth, and again, the gap, like I had no idea how to do that. How did I learn? Well, I was really clear, and then I was self-motivated. Nobody was standing over me saying you need to learn how to do a help desk. I just knew we had to figure that out. So that's now part of my mission for others, is when I see people that are stuck in whatever, they're in a career they don't want to be in, or they want the next promotion, and like they get stuck waiting for somebody to recognize them, waiting for somebody to pull them up and move them forward, instead of taking that initiative themselves to learn and grow. So I think that that's become a part of what I want to do, is help others tap into that potential. Okay, let's go into, how did you discover this yourself? You talked about not being really sure which direction to go at these certain points, and then what shifted for you that you learned how to learn and you learned how to get motivated yourself to move towards the goals you wanted?
I have, when I make decisions, when it's a bit bigger decision, it always goes in the same way. Let's say if I go back to making a decision on what kind of study I wanted to choose, it was a really difficult decision for me. And this might not be a good example because the first two I choose, the first one I quit in 4 days, another one in 3 months. Um, but I intuitively, I already know what to do. And then I start to think about it and I start to sleep on it. And I always come back to that first intuitive thought, like I should do this, or this feels good and I want to go in that direction. And I think when I was younger, I did not dare to trust that feeling. So all these other ideas and reasons and talking to people influenced decisions I made. And I started to trust it more and more. So that helps in making decisions. And also in terms of, I want to develop this, or I want to learn this. But I always look at it from a perspective of, am I going to put time and energy and maybe money in it? So is it just for leisure purpose? Is it just for fun? Or is it connected to the direction I want to go with the work that I'm doing? And often these decisions are based on, it feels good to do this, and most of the time it turns out to be that it's good. And I haven't studied intuition or those kind of things a lot. I mean, I've read about it and I know a bit about it, but it's really funny to be in workshops with people and letting them design a career from whatever the first thing that pops up in their mind. Like, here's a piece of paper, maybe put a timeline on it or just blank and start writing. What's the next 2 years of your career? Do not think in boundaries of your current job and those kind of things. Start designing it. And it's amazing what happens if you let people do that. And some people find that very difficult because it's different than the position that they're in. So we also have ways to okay, you can make three, your current position, something that if it's just taken over by AI or robots or whatever, and another thing. And it's also you have to make decisions and you have to go in a certain direction. There's no one single thing that's the best option. And I think it's something that I have accepted at some point. Like I can live here and I'm super happy that I live so close to the beach, but I also want to live in the mountains, right? And I can be very happy there, but then I would miss the beach. So
Yeah,
that's also a decision you make, and
right. The
it's
trade-offs.
also yeah, and accept that if you pursue one career, that it doesn't mean the door's closed for the other career, but um, yeah, there are many different routes you can take in big decisions and also small decisions in what you will learn. But you need to get some energy out of it.
Mm.
I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, it's making me think about the word prototype within your company of I think that at least to me signals that we are that experimentation. We are trying, we are seeing, okay, we're going to develop a prototype. It doesn't mean it's the end final product, but it is a place to start to try to even see because I think when you're talking about this experience of working with people and designing a career path, how many times might the participants kind of get in their own way by saying, oh, I can't do that, or no, I've been told, X, Y, and Z, or some of the stories that we tell ourselves, well, I can't do that because what will we do with this? And what about my family here? And how would we, all of those things that start to go. And I think that part of that is the brain is trying to protect us because the brain really
Uh,
likes certainty. Even if we're not totally happy, there is something about the unknown that takes courage to go forward and try. And I think a lot about, as a recovering perfectionist myself, the intersection between goals and the things that we want and perfectionism and fear that can stand in the way. And I was reading, there is an author, John Acuff. He wrote a book called Soundtracks, and and he writes a lot around goals and progress. He has this big group on Facebook about setting goals, and he asked people, why do you not make progress towards your goals? And there were like 300 responses, and I was just kind of skimming through them, and I saw over and over again perfectionism or procrastinating perfectionism. And I thought that was so interesting because let's say we get the goal clear and it is the right goal and we've done the route. Then there's this other piece that's like the resistance that stands in the way because then we have to put ourselves out there because the reason it's a goal is because we haven't achieved it yet. So there's some sort of
mm,
gap in our capacity or knowledge or experience. And the language of prototyping and the language of even being an amateur at something, like that is okay. Nobody is an expert in AI right now because it is constantly changing. So these people, like, I'm an AI expert. I mean, yes, okay, fine. There are some that have researched for a long time, but it's changing and evolving. And so being comfortable to say, I don't know all the answers yet, but this is what I'm figuring out, and these are the pieces that I'm putting together. I think that the language of prototype is helpful. Is that what brought y'all to that word and that process, or?
I think the words when we were brainstorming for the name of the company comes from the design thinking world. So building prototypes and experiment on it. There are a couple of things that you mentioned that resonate, and I think they help also me answering your specific question here, is that you mentioned the fear, and that fear is not only the fear of failure, but it's also the fear of success.
Ah, yeah.
And that why I'm saying this is that if if you want something, you have a certain idea about how it will feel and how the world would look when you achieve that or you get that or you are there, and then you're there, and then it's not like that. So you achieved the goal, the learning growth that you wanted to make, the new position that you have in your job, whatever it is, and then you're there, and then it's not what
Mm,
you thought it was. So to have something to keep it as a dream sometimes
mm,
is also nice, right? So it's not only the fear of failure, and it's also the fear of success.
mm,
Um, and the prototyping. So is around this. Just a real life example. I have a new business idea at the moment that I have an assumption that this is something I like, I can do well, and there's a market for it. That's like my assumption. So I can just start the business, think about a name, build a website, and then start selling to figure out that it's not working like I thought it was and all these other things. So what I'm doing currently is I've built a prototype. I built something in it's not PowerPoint, but I would call it a just a PowerPoint deck with this is the service. I had set my goal on I want to have 3 to 5 people in it. Do it for free for a month, um, and then see what happens. And I want to, this is my experiment. I want to understand, am I really good at it the way I think I can help people? Do I like it? So this is a really important one. Maybe I'm really good at it, but this requires me to meet people weekly. Maybe I really don't like it. So I need to change the business model a bit because it has a high impact on my weekly schedule. And I'm learning a lot about the service itself. I have 5 people. I started with 3, and I already changed like the first session. So the first session for the fourth and fifth person is different than
Mm-hmm.
from the first person. Um, and it doesn't cost me a lot of time, like putting this deck together, just a couple of hours, maybe finding the people another couple of hours, and then putting the work in these 5. I'm not promoting it. I'm not buying a lot of stuff or whatever. It's just testing out not only the business idea, but also if I like doing that. And that's now an investment of this summer for me. And then I'll make a decision based on whatever comes out of it.
Mm.
So build something so you can test all the assumptions that are there. Um, I always think about, and I cannot remember. So if somebody's listening and he knows or she knows what I'm talking about, there's this person that once said, if you have the money to buy a Ferrari, don't buy one, rent one first, and then figure out if you want to own one or just ride in it a few times because you like people watching to you when you drive one. And but actually the thing doesn't drive really nicely because it's a sports car, race car. So you don't want to own one and you don't want the stress of owning one, although you have the money. So just test it out first, see what happens, and then make bigger steps and decisions.
Mm. Yeah, I went to a session with Dave Evans. There's a book called Designing Your Life, and some
Hmm.
of what you were sharing there resonated with that experience. I got to be at this workshop with him in person in California, and it was one of the things that we did was design 3 different pathways, 3 different potential future lives, and then we talked about the idea of instead of having networking conversations or trying to get a job through your network of people, just having prototype conversations with people, to exactly your point of, do I even like this? So meeting, say, your dream job company, talking with somebody that's in a role there and spending time with them, again, not trying to get a job there, but just talk and see what's your day like. Come up with a series of questions that help you to know, is that even something that you would enjoy? You think this picture of it is something that you might enjoy. One of the questions that I put in our notes document, it was about the day-to-day life. I'd love to hit that. What does daily productivity kind of mean to you? What does an ideal day look like, from your perspective?
This is it's a good and fun question. So the work that we do is around designing a career. Not like you have to make you're building a new career, but also what current career, what are you going to learn and develop, but also about how do you do your work? How do you set up your day in a way that sets up for success, not only for the company you work for, but also for your own mental well-being, health, energy, those kind of things. So that is around designing your ideal work day or ideal work week. So obviously I've done those things quite often myself. And
So you can tell us all the secrets.
Well, this is my
I know.
day and my week, right? So people should not copy it, I think. But I came to this also by experimenting a lot. I heard somebody or m multiple people sharing like I start my day with a walk. I go outside, I walk, not even because I have a dog, but just to walk, to move, get fresh air, and because they like can start that day really well. I tried that for 2 weeks. It didn't work for me. So I don't do that. And I think I had a really good ideal, it's not perfect, ideal, because a perfect day doesn't exist, ideal day and week. And I became a father 2 years ago, and that destroyed my ideal day. Like so the ideal day that you have will change over time. It doesn't, things happen in your life. Also, I think mine is different in summer than in winter because I want to sleep more, for example, in winter. And I need to prioritize going outside more in winter because of the weather. So my ideal day currently starts with going to the gym, like in the morning, after my breakfast. And I usually start work around 10 a.m. And I have no meetings in the morning. So I think for you it's a morning, for me it's an afternoon because of our time difference. But I have a calendar link that I send out to people. I think you even used it to set this appointment. And I blocked a lot of parts of the week. You probably noticed because I don't want to have meetings in those time. So no meetings in the morning, so I can have like a block of a few hours concentrated work, or maybe I want to do something else, like have a walk, go for a walk for an hour. So no meetings in the morning. And my ideal day, I am creating something new or making something better within the business. And then in the afternoon, I have either meetings or do some work with clients. So that can be directly with the employees or with people that work in the learning and development space.
Love it. I hear in there the strategies of time boxing, if folks know that process. And again, I love the experimentation. It was making me think about different seasons of work. I
Mm,
similarly have just, there's different clients in different time periods where it might be a sprint with this client on this project. And there's other times where it's more of the deep work of creation. And I need a longer time block for there. And nobody can have that time. Like I need to block it. And so that continues to evolve on what works best for me too. I love just applying experimentation to that, to seeing. I definitely had to figure out different seasons when I became a parent. And then once
hmm
there were two of them, again, looking at, what made the most sense. I was trying at one point to like do everything in the morning, to like get up early and, have some quiet time of prayer and spirituality. And then also, everything that the kids needed and also work out and also get started. It was like, no, those things cannot all happen at the same time. And I don't know why I thought they could. And then I realized none of that could happen in the morning. I just needed to go slow with the boys at first in that season. And it would come back around to time when I could re-engage in those things first thing in the morning and have some self-compassion again as a bit of a maybe overworker and stuck in a bit of the American culture of like do.
mm.
And so I think that's something that people are realizing that's not healthy and realizing that it's actually not productive in the long run. But it's an uphill battle to fight this almost busyness as a badge of honor. And I was talking with my friend Lexi on actually the last podcast episode, and she said that time is wealth and the new status symbol is freedom and flexibility. And
hmm
so I see in that some shift in realizing that, having the flexibility to in the middle of the day go surfing or whatever it is for you, that is its own form of wealth and freedom in itself. So, okay, let's go to any book recommendations. And then I want to make sure that you tell people where they can find you. And if anyone is interested, are you looking for anybody else for the prototype piece that you're working on? And anything like that?
So to start with that, I'm not at the moment. I'm doing the free experiment now with 5 people, and hopefully, it is an experiment where I get confirmation on my assumptions. I mean, that's the idea, right? And then I'm gonna turn it into paid service. But it's not so much related to learning and development. Like one of the key things in the process that we have built with Prototype U is accountability within peers, so employees holding each other accountable of the learning plans that they create every month and they reflect together. So I'm taking the accountability part and I want to help entrepreneurs with their goals, setting them in the right way. So having like deep conversations on the root of these goals and challenges that are there, and then like an accountability service. So talk about these are the goals. What are your weekly goals? What are you going to do day by day? And then meet often to talk about that. So if the experiment runs in the way I think it does, then either I'll stop doing anything with it because it just doesn't work out the way I want, or I'll turn into paid service.
Awesome.
Book recommendations. I wrote them down because I knew you were going to ask this. One thing that I think is really important for people that do work, and I think that's most people, is to read deep work. So the deep work by Cal Newport about how to do deep work, because I think based on how we live at the moment, it's really hard to do deep work. If I look at schedules of friends and my girlfriend on how their days look with meetings and stuff, there's zero room for deep work because there's so many meetings and whatever that's put in their calendars. So another book that I liked was *Sapiens*. I do not really know how to pronounce the author's name, but it's a really well-known book, I think, *Sapiens*, about a history of people, and I learned a lot about why we do stuff in our time, where that comes from. So that was super interesting. And I'm reading at the moment *Procrastinate on Purpose*.
Ooh.
Just because I love the title, I thought I have to read this. But it's an interesting book on productivity and just cut through the noise and procrastinate stuff that is not that important.
Ooh.
So those will be 3 books that I would recommend. But definitely the deep work. Like if there's something that you want to read and you haven't read it by Cal Newport, that's a great book.
And podcasts. I see some connection in the deep work.
So he has a podcast. Yeah. He has a podcast as well. I think it's called the Deep Work Podcast. So Carl Newport is not with an R, Carl Newport, some people think. I think the Deep Work book comes from his PhD research. So it's not just another guy with an opinion. It comes from proper research. So you can find some gems also in the podcast. And I like the podcast, The Minimalists. It's just, I think, not really related to what we've discussed so far, but I just like to listen to it, just to simplify life.
Yeah. Okay, based on your list, I want to give you a book recommendation. Have you read Essentialism by Greg McKeown?
I think I have not read the book, but listened to a few podcasts with him. Funny enough,
Yeah.
he was also on the Deep Work podcast.
Okay, yeah, they're in that same space. I think we're
Yes.
interested in very similar things. It's like yes, productivity and growth, but in a holistic way. I don't quite have words for that piece yet, but just in a way, well, that's human centered and aligned to design thinking, that it is not only productivity for productivity's sake, but for joy and depth of human experience to have these opportunities. And so
Yep.
okay, and where can people find you? Where do you want people to reach out? Maybe learn more about when your business becomes a paid business in the future, perhaps, or the other work that you're doing. Where's the best place?
It would be on LinkedIn. I post quite regularly on LinkedIn on learning and development stuff, things that are connected to the work I do with Prototype U. So it's mainly about learning at the workplace through experiments, accountability, and ownership. I think we haven't discussed that in this episode. Maybe we need another episode for that. But I think that's a really important one in the learning and development space. The ownership that employees take. So on LinkedIn, my name, I think it's easiest to click on the link that is connected to this episode.
Okay, thank you so much, Kristiaan. It's been so delightful to connect and to talk about all these things. I look forward to staying connected and learning more about your services and all the things that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for listening to the Building Thinkers podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a podcast rating and review. That helps more listeners find us in the world of podcasting algorithms. You can find out more about my learning and development strategy services at buildingthinkers.com. And remember, there's no limit to what you can learn.